Climate priorities. This opinion argues Pakistan's political distractions worsen climate impacts and demand urgent policy change. The monsoons came earlier this year. Monsoons is jargon, which means seasonal heavy rains in South Asia. This opening sentence serves as a thesis statement by stating that the timing and intensity of seasonal rains matter for national preparedness. But they were not unexpected. Unexpected is adjective, which means not anticipated. This sentence means experts had warned that early rains were likely. The very people who had been warning us of a terrible summer with its punishing heat had also cautioned that the rains would come early and would come down hard. Punishing is adjective, which means extremely severe or harsh. Cautioned is verb, which means issued a warning. This sentence means forecasters predicted both extreme heat and an early, heavy monsoon. And yet the country continued to be distracted by the usual business of politics. Distracted is verb, which means diverted attention away from urgent issues. Business of politics is idiomatic expression, which means routine political maneuvering and debate. This sentence means political attention remained focused on routine politics rather than preparedness. It is no wonder, then, that the ferocity of the rains took most of us by surprise in the mountains, in the plains, and in the cities, both those we claim are well-run and those where the governance crisis is so severe that we discuss it ad infinitum. Ferocity is noun, which means extreme intensity or violence. Governance crisis is jargon, which means systemic failure in public administration. Ad infinitum is idiomatic expression, which means endlessly or without limit. This sentence means the intense rains expose failures in governance across regions and repeatedly debated problems. Partisan views aside, there is little evidence anywhere of any of the governments, provincial or federal, being prepared to deal with the rage of climate change. Partisan is adjective, which means biased toward a political party. Prepared is adjective, which means ready to respond effectively. Rage is metaphor, which means violent and destructive force. This sentence means governments at all levels were largely unprepared for severe climate impacts. In fact, in most places, when nature spins out of control, it is helped in its destruction by the mistakes of governance. Spins out of control is phrasal verb, which means becomes unmanageable. Mistakes of governance is jargon, which means policy and administrative errors. This sentence means poor governance amplifies natural disasters into greater destruction. The mistakes have not been addressed, even though it has been 3 years since the superfloods of 2022. Superfloods is hyperbole, which means exceptionally large and destructive floods. This sentence means lessons from the 2022 catastrophe remain largely unlearned. The havoc that the deluge caused should have convinced us to change our errant ways. Havoc is noun, which means widespread destruction. Deluge is noun, which means overwhelming flood. Errant is adjective, which means mistaken or misguided. This sentence means the severe damage from past floods should have driven policy change. But it seems that it has not. Has not is phrasal verb, which means did not happen. This sentence means no meaningful change has occurred. The rains, their pattern, the rising temperatures, even the pollution in winters. How often has everyone been warning about them and about what some of these factors mean for our mountains and glaciers? Rising temperatures is jargon, which means increasing average temperatures due to climate change. Glaciers is technical term, which means large bodies of dense ice in mountains. This sentence means multiple climate indicators have long been flagged as dangerous for mountain environments. But governments are said to have encouraged or turned a blind eye to those wielding the axe. Turned a blind eye is idiomatic expression, which means deliberately ignored wrongdoing. Wielding the axe is metaphor, which means cutting down trees or exploiting resources. This sentence means authorities either allowed or ignored deforestation and environmental harm. According to those who keep an eye on the issue, the rate of deforestation has a direct link with the damage caused in the northern parts of the country. Deforestation is technical term, which means large-scale cutting of forests. Direct link is idiomatic expression, which means a clear causal connection. This sentence means forest loss is directly implicated in flood and landslide damage. Even after the devastation, there is not much discussion of what needs to change. Devastation is noun, which means great destruction or ruin. This sentence means policy debate about needed reforms is minimal. Judging from the actions of those in power to most of the reporting on the issue, there is little effort to understand what has happened. Judging from his phrasal verb, which means based on available evidence. This sentence means both rulers' actions and media reporting show limited inquiry into root causes. Had it not been for the footage on social media, I doubt most of us would even know about the level of destruction. Footage is noun, which means recorded video material. Social media is jargon, which means online platforms for sharing content. This sentence means social platforms revealed the scale of the catastrophe more than official channels did. Indeed, our reporting and the ensuing discussion are about some missing technology, the early warning system, which got stuck in bureaucratic red tape. Early warning system is technical term, which means mechanisms that alert people to impending disasters. Bureaucratic red tape is idiomatic expression, which means excessive administrative obstacles. This sentence means focus shifted to a delayed warning system caught in administrative delays. That is a story which appeals to us far more than the cutting down of trees in the north. Cutting down of trees is phrasal verb, which means felling forests. This sentence means easy narratives about technology distract from harder issues like deforestation. But I would be wrong to say that this is the only preferred topic. Preferred is adjective, which means chosen or favored. This sentence means there are other popular but limited focuses in official discourse. Encroachments are another favorite subject. Encroachments is jargon, which means illegal occupation of public land or waterways. This sentence means illegal building on riverbeds is a recurring talking point. The encroachments on riverbeds have been a recurring theme since the 2010 floods, but neither the people who have to pay to reconstruct the encroachments again and again, or the government, which has to help the people pick up the pieces, makes any difference to the policies or administrations that allow this. Riverbeds is noun, which means the channels where rivers flow. Recurring theme is idiomatic expression, which means a repeatedly appearing issue. Pick up the pieces is idiomatic expression, which means help recover after disaster. This sentence means repeated rebuilding after illegal riverside development continues without policy change. Come the next floods, and the hotels by the river will still be there. By the river is prepositional phrase which means adjacent to riverbanks. This sentence means profitable riverside developments remain undisturbed and vulnerable. Sadly, despite this scenario, prime ministers and chief ministers will only talk about this. Prime ministers and chief ministers is jargon, which means national and provincial leaders. This sentence means top leaders restrict public remarks to superficial fixes like removing encroachments. Shehbaz Sharif, who mentioned it during his trip to the affected areas up north recently, is no different. Trip is noun, which means official visit. This sentence means even leaders who visit disaster zones focus on easy-to-announce actions. If I make a guess, then encroachments and their removal tend to be a comfortable subject for most of our ruling elite, regardless of party or province. Comfortable subject is idiomatic expression, which means an issue that is easy and non-threatening to address. Ruling elite is jargon, which means those in governing power and influence. This sentence means elites prefer addressing visible but superficial problems. It is somehow linked with their idea of good governance, for instance. Bigger, wider roads for cars, or the space to build automobiles, as well as their discomfort perhaps with shabby buildings or carts owned by the poor. Good governance is jargon, which means efficient, fair public administration. Shabby is adjective, which means run down or poor quality. This sentence means elites equate development with visible infrastructure and aesthetic order. And because it is easy to implement their words in the case of poor segments, it's a comforting promise to make. Comforting promise is idiomatic expression, which means a politically convenient pledge. This sentence means removing informal settlements is an easy-to-deliver promise that ignores root causes. The idea or notion of encroachments is complex and can also refer to the overreach of the rich, which is easily ignored. Overreach is noun, which means excessive expansion of power or privilege. This sentence means elite land grabs are also encroachments but get overlooked. Rarely do we refer to the upmarket housing societies built on prime agricultural land as encroachments, or even to expensive homes whose construction involves covering water channels or altering the level of the riverbed. Upmarket is adjective, which means aimed at wealthy buyers. Prime agricultural land is jargon, which means the most fertile farmland. This sentence means affluent developments on valuable farmland, and water channels are seldom called encroachments. Indeed, nearly every year, Islamabad is witness to chaos as rainwater makes its way through land where its path has been blocked or narrowed. Witness to is phrasal verb, which means observe or experience. Chaos is noun, which means disorder and confusion. This sentence means blocked waterways regularly cause urban flooding and disorder. And yet the conversation about encroachments for us begins and ends with images of a shoddy hotel falling into a river in the north of the country. Shoddy is adjective, which means poorly built or inferior. This sentence means media focus tends to sensationalize failures affecting the poor rather than structural elite actions. Or the cart of the poor person, or the shanty towns where migrants live. Shanty towns is noun, which means makeshift settlements of the urban poor. This sentence means poor communities are the typical subjects of encroachment narratives. But be it the environment or security, only some of these encroachments are tackled. Security is noun, which means public safety and order. This sentence means selective enforcement addresses only certain encroachments. All of this happens because none of us want to accept that a large part of this environmental disaster is caused by our development model, be it in the cities or the mountains. Development model is jargon, which means the economic and planning approach to growth. This sentence means the prevailing pattern of development, urban and rural, contributes to disasters. A development model which thinks construction is progress, be it the hotels in the north or big interchanges, wide roads in the middle of cities, or sprawling housing societies on their outskirts. Sprawling is adjective, which means extensive and spread out. This sentence means sprawling construction projects are equated with progress despite environmental cost. Indeed, other than Karachi, no city in Pakistan is trying to encourage vertical growth. It's far easier to allow property developers to cut down trees, take over agricultural land, and build housing societies on it. Vertical growth is jargon, which means building upwards, high-rises to save land. Property developers is jargon, which means private real estate companies. This sentence means a preference for horizontal expansion drives land use choices that harm the environment. Of course, all of this is connected to Pakistan's population explosion. Population explosion is hyperbole, which means very rapid population growth. This sentence means rapid demographic growth increases pressure on land and resources. And this is a topic that we just can't be bothered to discuss ever. Nirchas can't be bothered is idiomatic expression, which means unwilling to take time or effort. This sentence means political leaders avoid confronting population policy. All of this, Ronadona, and it is little else than lamenting, might sound familiar to regular readers, if there are any, of this space. Lamenting is verb, which means expressing sorrow or complaint. This sentence means the author recognizes repeating complaints, but insists on their necessity. But it is hard to avoid this as the environmental crisis grows with every passing season and every passing year. Environmental crisis is jargon, which means large-scale ecological breakdowns caused by humans. This sentence means worsening climate impacts make the topic unavoidable. In the meantime, it appears hopeful that unlike 3 years ago, the entire focus of our ruling elite is not to speak of climate justice and ask the world for money to fix this. Climate justice is jargon, which means fair allocation of climate burdens and aid. This sentence means leaders may be shifting focus away from appealing for external funds and rhetoric. Though only time will tell if this relative silence means they are ready to take some responsibility or not responsibility, which moves beyond announcing compensation and then providing it to some extent. Compensation is noun, which means payouts to victims for loss or damage. This sentence means true responsibility requires systemic action beyond one-off payments. The writer is a journalist. Published in Dawn, August 26, 2025.